Welcome to Films and Stuff with your hosts, Pete Mitchell and Ethan Hunt.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Films and Stuff. I am Ethan, along with the most valuable Pete. Hey, Pete, what's up today?
Not much, buddy. How are you?
A very, very happy Diwali to you and your family right now.
Thank you very much.
I know that you have made time in your family schedule for this week's episode of Stream or Skip. I know the rules. You know the rules. Regular listeners know the rules. But for the newbies, can you explain what we're doing in 20 seconds or less?
I'll give it a shot. So Ethan and I have prepared a list of TV shows and movies for each other. Every week, we randomly assign each other a new show to watch. We watch at least 2 episodes or 30 minutes if it's a feature-length show. And on that basis, we determine if that show or movie is worthy of being streamed or skipped.
That's right. I shall go first. We were both on Amazon Prime this week.
That's right.
You chose for me something that is a little bit old, but still very, very good. And that is Sneaky Pete, which stars Giovanni Ribisi, created by David Shore, who you probably know from House, and Bryan Cranston, Heisenberg from Breaking Bad. This was actually first released in 2017. There were 3 seasons, so it ended at the end of 2019. But it still has a very, very popular following. And it's filmed in a way that it's a little bit timeless. The premise is as thus. A gentleman named Marius is incarcerated for a bunch of crimes that he has committed, more like kind of petty crimes. He has a cellmate named Pete. Marius is released. You know, he does his time. He's out for good behavior or whatever. But he still owes a lot of debt. I guess some gambling debt and some other like loan sharks after him. So as soon as he's released, he's worried that he's going to be on the run, that these guys are going to be after him. And being a criminal, he doesn't really have a lot of places to go. So what he does is he recalls his cellmate, Pete, who's going to be incarcerated for a long time yet. And Pete talked very fondly and at length. You know, that guy that like you're sitting in your bunk beds and the bunkmate is just talking and talking and talking and talking and talking. Pete talked about his family and where they lived. And he gave just great details about his aunt and his uncle and his cousin and this place and what the summers were like and what they used to do as kids and so forth. Marius decides, why don't I just take Pete's identity? I'll go to Pete's family. I'll say I'm Pete. They haven't seen me in a long, long time. I kind of resemble him, height and weight and so forth. And now I know a lot of these stories about almost everyone in his family. I'm a con man. I'll just fit in with them. And the people after me won't ever find me. So he goes and he just kind of like knocks on the door, the family home. It's like, hey, it's me, Pete. And they're like, Pete, that's you? Yeah, where's Aunt so-and-so? And where's cousin blah, blah, blah? And I can't wait to try your famous egg salad again. And let's do that game like we did as kids. And they're like, whoa, it's Pete. You know, he's out of prison. We had no idea. This is so unexpected. It's so great to see you. And basically, he's just a con man who fits in with the family. Little does he know, he thinks this is just going to be a safe place. He's going to live under the radar. Family's got its own dramas. They're involved in some shady stuff as well. And before he knows it, he's basically back into the life that he was trying to avoid, but this time as his former cellmate, Pete. So that is the premise after I've watched almost 3 episodes, 2.5. They are very good. Giovanni Ribisi, you've seen him before. You know, he's that character actor that you're like, once you see his face, like, yeah, I know him. I saw him in a bunch of stuff. Can't name any of it, but you've definitely seen him in a bunch of stuff. Plays the character very, very well. Only 3 seasons. It's a very solid mooch. What does that mean? It means if you start watching it, you will probably continue watching it for a few episodes. If you stop watching it, you will not feel the need to change your schedule the next day to continue watching episodes.
Okay.
You will not feel the need to stay up until 4 a.m. and ruin yourself the next day just to watch one more episode. You'll be able to stop. But while you're watching it, you'll be like, yeah, this is pretty good. You don't feel the need to find an alternative. You don't feel like you're missing out on something. It's an absolutely solid show to watch. It is definitely not a must subscribe. I would not say that you should subscribe to Amazon Prime only to watch this. At the same time, I cannot tell you to absolutely avoid this at all costs. If someone's watching it, absolutely sit down, enjoy it with them. If you have nothing else to watch, you're totally out of ideas, or you're not willing to take a risk on something that's received mixed reviews, Sneaky Pete absolutely will satisfy you if you watch a couple hours of it. And again, it's a little bit timeless in terms of where it's filmed and how it's filmed. It's not like a sci-fi movie. It's not based on technology or locations. So absolutely, you could even pick it up like in a few months and you won't feel like there's any big disconnect in terms of the timing or where or how it's filmed. To be honest, not much more I can say about that. Like I said, solid mooch, Sneaky Pete on Amazon Prime. Pretty solid pick by you, Pete.
Disclaimer, I am not the Pete of Sneaky Pete, just in case anyone's confused. I'm a different kind of con man.
Different kind of con man. All right. So that's Sneaky Pete on Amazon Prime. And now the more main event, we stick to Amazon Prime for your assignment this week.
I had self-assigned, even though we're supposed to do this on a more random basis, Gen V, which, I mean, unless you're living in a rock on Mars, we all know that this is a spin-off of The Boys. It's the same universe, same time frame, even in the same place, same city, just a different aspect of the story. And let me start off by saying, for those of us who are concerned about it being a spin-off, this is how you do a spin-off.
This is how you do a spin-off.
Just like Better Call Saul previously.
Oh, yeah.
There's very light interaction with what we would call the quote-unquote main storyline. There are some great cameos. There are some great callbacks. But nothing so intense that you need to have seen The Boys to understand what's going on. It adds value to it. And it's mostly an independent storyline that has the potential to do multiple seasons if they want, or they can integrate it into the main storyline if they want. So it's ultimately a very flexible show, and that's the hallmark of a really good spin-off. You have no idea where it's going, and that's a good thing. Like, you don't know the end game. The basic premise, for those of you who don't know, the story is about a university that's funded by the Vought Corporation. And think of the university as like the minor league development league for superheroes. And it's basically got 2 schools. It's got a school for acting, and it's got a school which effectively becomes a pipeline for crime fighting. And they work in conjunction because if you've watched The Boys, you understand that the Vought Corporation basically runs superheroes as a company. And they've got 2 different lines. They've got superheroes who are crime fighters. And what the Vought Corporation does is they own their contracts and they farm them out to different cities to become the supplementary power force to help fight crime in that city. The second income stream for Vought Corporation is that they have their own media empire. They make movies, they make TV series, they have their own streaming platform. Instead of actors, they use superheroes who aren't quite good enough to cut it as crime fighters. And that's where the 2 different schools are from. The show centers on 4 super teens or very young adults. And the idea is that you go through the lives of these 4 characters, how they meet each other at school. Some of them are in the acting side, some of them are in the crime fighting side. You obviously learn that there's some kind of conspiracy that the school is involved in, and we learn what the conspiracy is. I'm not going to go too deep on the plot because, it's kind of integral not just to the show, but potentially for the main boys storyline as well.
Yep.
And the students are, as you would expect, some of them are trying to uncover what the conspiracy theory are. Some of them are trying to protect the school. And the ultimate goal is that, they want to join either the 7 or they want to join the crime fighting associates. I mean, on a very high level, think of this kind of like Professor X's X-Men versus Magneto and the Brotherhood of Mutants. Conceptually, they're almost identical. One squad is all about integrating superheroes with wider humanity, and the other squad is about elevating superheroes above humanity. Like, we don't need them, they're bringing us down, everyone's biased against us, everyone's effectively racist without it being racist, whatever the word is, superhero-ist, right? Or superpower-ist. And that's what it is. So it's basically a war between these 2 sides. Honestly, if you've seen The Boys, there's not much more to say about it because it's more of the same. It's exactly as Ethan has described it last week. There's more gore, more violence, more sex, more explicit behavior, more cursing. If you liked The Boys or if you loved The Boys, you're going to like and love this show. If you hated The Boys and disliked all of those aspects, you're going to dislike this show and dislike all of these aspects. It's exactly the same. I loved The Boys. I thought it was very good because I thought it was a very cynical take on what it meant to be a superhero in the modern world. And it's almost like a parody without it being a parody. I thought it's great. And that's precisely the same way I feel about Gen V. 100%, this is a must subscribe. No caveats, with the sole exception that if you didn't like The Boys, stay away from this because you're going to get more of this, just with a different cast and younger.
So everything you've said, I agree with. The interesting part of The Boys and Gen V to me is how you view it compared to what we just discussed on one of our other episodes about like the MCU. If you haven't listened to us, we had an earlier episode where we talked about MCU's The Marvels, which has just been released. And as you mentioned, Pete, The Boys in Gen V is kind of, in a way, a parody of the superhero genre. But not really a parody. It's more of a dark look at if there were superheroes, what it would really be like in society and how they would really relate to their human handlers, for example, And what we see from MCU, all of our Marvel superheroes are very, very well behaved. They're polite. And for the lack of a better word, they kind of fall in line whenever Smulders or Fury tell them to do something, right? You don't get a lot of blowback from them. Whereas The Boys in Gen V kind of flips that on its head. And you see this really interesting power dynamic, which is Vought as leaders are really vulnerable against kind of like a more powerful superheroes, right? Like you see a lot of killing, you see a lot of gore, because ultimately you can't really control your superheroes. And even among the superheroes, what I find fascinating is a difference in strength and capabilities between the superheroes. And it's one of the things that I railed against for, what's happening in the MCU, which is kind of everyone is starting to get like homogenized in terms of their powers and being able to fly and being able to fight. Gen V and The Boys, I think, does a very good job of saying, look, everyone has a power. And apart from 1 or 2 folks, Homelander, Golden Boy, who are kind of all powerful, there is really a pecking order in terms of powers and how people are able to use their powers. And people have very different powers. And some of those, when they're used properly, can be very, very effective. But if that's kind of mitigated, then they're very, very vulnerable and they could be injured or die. And I think that more practical look at how powers work is what makes The Boys and Gen V right now a more compelling universe than the MCU.
I think that's the exact right way to look at it, in the sense that,
again, you can't help but to compare this to MCU. And MCU, I think, is a very optimistic take where all of our superheroes...
Right. It's almost naive.
It's naive where Captain Marvel is very smart, but she's also a good person, and she just wants to do what is right. And you know what? God bless us that we get such a good superhero, right? It's the right way to look at things. The reality, I think, is how The Boys is depicted, which is you're likely to get a superhero that kind of abuses their power. Homelander is like the best example from The Boys, which is someone who's like, look, I'm the most powerful thing in the universe. Nothing can destroy me. Why should I be nice to people? Why should I always be pleasant? You know, like, he feels how exhausting it is to always be autographs and be kind and be nice and fix these problems and fix that problem. You see like his little bit of insecurity as well. You know, you see the problems with him trying to have relationships where he knows that he's the best at everything and all powerful, but he still can't really get people to like him or to know him. That's a more realistic view, right? And you also deal with the things which is like mental health, which you see a lot in Gen V, right? Which is not everyone who's a teenager is actually able to responsibly use their powers, or they don't have kind of the mental makeup, you know, to be able to use their powers. And the same thing you see with some of the folks in The Boys or in Gen V, the powers actually kind of sap them. They may have a power, but the more they use the power, the more it kind of depletes their brain, or it puts a strain on their body. MCU kind of glosses over this in an optimistic way, which is, hey, if you get infected by the Terrasect, don't worry, you'll be fine. You'll never have a headache. You'll never have indigestion, kind of grow weak from using your powers. You'll just be happy and healthy every day, and you can use your power as much as you want. Whereas Gen V is kind of like, hey, if you use your power too much, it's going to like drain you physically. It's going to deplete you. There is a physical cost for flesh and blood and bones and tendons to use whatever this power is so regularly, you know? And if you think about it, that's probably a more practical way to look at powers, right? Carol Danvers, she can just like fly and she can like ignite sun and she can do this and that. And then she's like, oh, like, boy, that was a long day. I'm just gonna, you know, chill out and listen to some music, you know, maybe have some popcorn. The reality is, if you do that, you're probably totally spent.
Yeah.
You know, you may need a huge amount of food to recover. You may need sleep. You may not be able to function for a few days after exhausting yourself or exerting yourself like that.
It adds an element of weakness, adds a superpowered flaw. It humanizes them in a certain way.
This isn't just to like rail on MCU, but there is a little bit of fatigue with MCU. And I feel, and we've talked about this, I'm starting to feel more fatigued because everyone is becoming more homogenous in terms of their powers. When you look at the original MCUs, Iron Man had villains who were potentially able to kill him. Iron Man had some very big challenges. Even the original Spider-Mans had real challengers. We're not really feeling that anymore in the MCU. Everyone is, I mean, Thor lost an eye from his sister, right? Like, these people actually suffered for a while. Winter Soldier lost his arm. There was some real carnage in the past. More and more, I feel like we're getting away from that, and everyone's a little bit homogenized in terms of their all-encompassing power. But I think The Boys puts that more into perspective, where you see superheroes die. You see superheroes who are damaged. And then you see a very real tension between humans who love superheroes to protect them from crime, but are a little bit skeptical in terms of the carnage that they create, and superheroes who are like, hey, We do not want to be controlled. We should not be subject to like a genocide. We're a little bit skeptical of humans because we do think that eventually they want to either control or eliminate us. Like that's a very real issue.
Ultimately, it comes down to consequences. And there is a serious consequence culture in something like The Boys. And of course, again, they do parody a little bit. They do satirize it a little bit. But that's also what makes it a little bit more grounded and real, even though it's obviously done to an extreme for comedic effect.
Yes.
But there are real consequences, whereas the MCU, especially as of late, the consequences feel a lot less serious.
It's something that's ignored. Even when we watch the Marvels, remember when Fury and all the cats kind of escape from the space station? They just kind of land in New York City, right? In like Hudson Yard or something. And that's just kind of it. There's not a lot of like police around. There's not like even like an ambulance or evac or anything. It's just kind of like, no big deal. Spaceship.
I have never seen New York look so empty in my life.
Yeah, it's not the focus. And that's okay. I mean, we're not here to watch a different movie. We're here to watch MCU, but The Boys and Gen V are not like that. And I would argue that Marvel Studios should watch Gen V and The Boys just to kind of see a different perspective on that superhero genre. Not that they should pivot and adopt that, but maybe it will help them just to be a little bit more grounded in terms of the stories that they're telling, you know?
Yeah.
Because the stories of Gen V and The Boys are not superhero stories. They're really personal stories about people dealing with their issues. And their superpowers are more of like a means of dealing with those personal issues, you know? So are we both giving Gen V a must subscribe?
100% it's a must subscribe. Unlike other must subscribes, the only caveat is that it's a lot. Ethan and I have a certain type of humor, a certain sense of humor, and a certain willingness and a certain level of acceptance with that level of what most people would consider as
vulgar,
excess and vulgarity. We are okay with that. So that's the only caveat, is that you have to know what you're walking into. It's a lot.
I would watch the Marvels with my mom, no problem. I think there's only kind of one short scene in there that was a little bit cringy, and I'm not even sure my mom would catch it. I would not watch The Boys or Gen V with my mom. I would probably not even watch it with my brother. I think that's really something that you should watch alone. It's not something that you really want to watch in the company of others, just because there are a lot of kind of gasping scenes that are awkward if you're with anybody.
Yeah, and it's also...
Even you and I would kind of be like, you know, like...
Yeah, it's also a place where you kind of might get embarrassed at the things that you find funny and enjoy watching, and you don't want people to think less of you for it.
Pete, hold on. The way you articulated that is so right. That's just one of the more profound statements that has ever been uttered on this podcast, which is it's not so much what you're watching. It's that if you laugh at that, you're kind of exposing yourself a little bit in terms of what you find funny. Even if you and I were watching that on Watch Party, it would be a little bit like awkward, even for me and you. Like, who would comment on that first? Or would we just like not comment at all, and we just assume that the other person would be like, oh, that was gross, or oh my gosh. Like, any comment, whoever raises it first says a little bit about them. And I think it's really better to watch it by yourself, enjoy it in all its vulgarity and craziness, but it's a little bit personal, even what you chuckle at.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where the next week over drinks, we can be like, oh my God, can you believe they went and did that?
Yeah.
That's one thing. But in the heat of that moment, you don't want to be the one who gasps and laughs out loud first.
Yeah.
Or it was like, oh, that was awesome first.
Or laughed a little bit too enthusiastically, right?
Exactly.
Like,
no, and there are certainly times where I'll openly admit, like, I can't believe they just did that. Hold on, I have to watch this again and then rewind 15 seconds so that you can see that scene again.
You would never say that in front of me. Be like, hey, Ethan, can you run that back? And be like, what kind of pervert are you?
Yeah, I mean, there's a scene in the last season of The Boys where, spoiler alert, a very small, like a shrinking Ant-Man corollary goes inside the body part of somebody else.
Yeah.
I was watching it and I was like, wait a minute. Is that the body part I think it is?
Yeah.
Did that just happen?
Is that an intestine or is that something else? Yeah, exactly. Because you see it in real time, and then when you figure it out, you're like, hold on, I want to like double check what I just saw. I agree.
Exactly.
Anyway, so that's Gen V, which is your streamer skip. I think we both give it a 5. The only caveat is, look, you've got to have a stomach for it.
Agreed. Shall we move swiftly on to something a little bit more family friendly? Shall we quickly just talk about bodies?
Keeping on the stream or skip theme, last week you assigned me Bodies, which was a new release on Netflix. And recall that was about 4 detectives in 4 different time periods. Now we've seen the season finale. So spoiler alerts, turn this off now if you don't want to find out how it ends. But Pete, what did you think of the ending?
I loved it. I thought it absolutely nailed it.
For a time travel theme, I thought it hit all the right notes at the end. I thought it was not just a clever ending, but also a very realistic ending. And I thought that the way that they set it up was really, really good.
I was so pleased with it. It felt satisfying because if they really wanted to, and again, I don't want to make this a stereotype, but like, were this an American production?
Yeah.
You know exactly how it would have ended, which is they would have solved one paradox only to have created a second paradox at the very end of the last episode, which would have potentially set up sequels and other seasons.
Yeah.
They didn't do that. They buttoned it up nice and tight and said, hey, we're done with this now. It's such a nice, simple way to do it.
The throat still exists. We should put a little bit of effort into it. There is some type of particle or thing underground, right? And we're not really sure where it came from or what, right? But this is what they call the throat. And the throat still exists in 2070.
My take was, this is why it's so good, is because this is where we can talk about, the different interpretations.
Yeah.
My understanding was the body, the guy who died, was this astrophysics or physics professor from the year 2050.
Yeah.
And he had a theory that there was a way that you could travel through time if you did some dark matter science or whatever. I don't remember the exact science, and that was kind of irrelevant to the point. The point was that this scientist was laughed at because he believed time travel was theoretically possible because you could send particles back in time to certain points if you created this device. My understanding was that the throat existed because he created it in 2050. By changing the past, I don't know if that happens anymore. I don't know if that future comes to place where he creates that device any longer. I don't think it was a static anomaly. I think it was a device that he created called the throat, which allowed for them to travel through past.
I have to say I didn't really get that, but I also think that intentionally that aspect was made a little bit fuzzy.
Oh yeah, totally.
Because the one thing I didn't get was the throat didn't really seem to be at his university or his laboratory.
Yeah.
It seemed to be kind of like in a random place.
Like offsite warehouse kind of place.
Yeah. So that's worth maybe taking another look at. Interestingly, do you have a lot of sympathy for Elias or Mannix? My take was Elias as a kid was quite sympathetic. And my take on Mannix was that Mannix, deep down, wasn't really intending to do anything wrong. He was really a devoted husband. He was sincerely a very devoted father. that he was really trying to create something special within his community, apart from obviously the bomb disaster that he was entirely responsible for in 2023. And I also have to say, it's a little bit unclear why this bomb needed to take place, if there would have been a different or possibly more humane way for him to kind of reshape the world. And I think also there hasn't been enough emphasis on how the world has improved post 2023. So, for example, if the post apocalyptic world in 2050 and beyond was much safer, if it was much more just, much more humane, if the physical environment had improved, if there was an absence of war and conflict and all these things, had we seen that that was actually the case, then I think we could have a stronger argument that the actions taken by Elias or Mannix were net positive. I think the issue that is not particularly clear is how this one catastrophic event in London only could have had any meaningful impact on the world as a whole. And it's not entirely clear to me whether that change actually took place or whether or not Mannix or Elias are satisfied with that. I'd ask, Pete, what's your thought on Mannix or Elias? Like, do you have any sympathy towards them and their ultimate goals and what they really wanted to achieve? Are you just like, nope, I don't have any sympathy for them whatsoever?
No, I mean, what's interesting about Mannix's character is that the things he does, know that you will be loved, that kind of thing, it comes from some form of emotional trauma. And it's about him, basically, he goes back in time and sets up this world so that he is going to be loved, or what he believes is love. Mm-hmm. But it's clearly not, right? Like, he's manipulated the world around him, married into this family, again, on a lie. You kind of feel bad for him in the end episode, or at least I did, because you kind of understand why he's doing what he's doing. You also realize that when Maplewood goes back in time and explains to Hillinghead what's happening, and then Hillinghead speaks to Mannix and explains to him what's going to happen, good on him to then,
he's really
while
shaken.
He's going with the plan, he's not just shaken, he then understands that this isn't what he wanted after all.
To be honest, I found it a little bit sad, particularly his relationship with Polly.
Yeah.
Because when you see the original, he was sincerely a good husband and sincerely a devoted father. Like, he really did things right. It was disappointing then that when you saw kind of like the revised version, after he spoke to Hillinghead, you saw how distant he was towards Polly.
Exactly.
You saw how shaken he was. And it was just like, oh, you were such a good father and good husband. And now you're kind of like this very cold, aloof, detached dude. That was
the one who ended up suffering the most out of all of this, actually.
Yeah.
Like, she took the brunt of it in both scenarios. In one, she was lied to. In the other, she was lied to. And she was kind of mistreated. And she dies for it.
But I have to say, we've had a lot of criticisms on Netflix for their big budget movies, right? We had Red Notice with Ryan Reynolds. We had Gray Man with
Ryan Gosling.
Yeah. This is, I think, a great example of what Netflix does best. When they put their mind to it, when they support something like this, it's exceptional. Stuff like this, Umbrella Academy. Man, I wonder how much it costs to make Bodies. I'd really like to know if it costs more than $50 million to make Bodies. Because we have said time and time again, instead of spending $250 on Red Notice, give us 5 Bodies. And that's absolutely true, is that Red Notice gets all the bling, but Bodies is what I think keeps people addicted to Netflix. It's what keeps me subscribing to Netflix, is a show like this that's got 8 absolutely great episodes that just like blows my mind.
It's not like there were any crazy visual effects.
Nope.
It's not like there were any crazy or outlandish sets. It's mostly like, Victorian era houses. It's
Yep.
modern day London, and it's not even central
Yeah.
London, right?
Nope.
It's not tremendously expensive. I don't imagine it to be tremendously expensive.
Yeah.
British film actors and British television actors aren't known for being paid millions of dollars or, hundreds of millions of dollars as salaries. They're also not super famous actors. They could be, but they're not, certainly on an international basis.
No.
I can't imagine. It's a very expensive series, 8 episodes. Like, this isn't going to cost $10 million or maybe even $5 million per episode. It's a British TV series. They're not going to spend that kind of money because British TV series in general don't cost that much money, and they don't have the budget for that kind of spending.
Yeah. What I should do is I probably almost never give ratings on Netflix. I should give this a thumbs up. And I'm really curious as to what other recommendations I will get based on this.
Oh, you don't? So that's the first thing I do is once I've watched the series, I give my ratings immediately. What I love, by the way, and Netflix, I know now that you're listening to us, because very soon after we started our rating system, Netflix changed theirs. It used to just be a thumbs up or a thumbs down, but now it can be a double thumbs up, a thumbs up, or a thumbs down, which leads me to believe that this is a must subscribe.
Yep.
It's okay. It's a wait for streaming, or it's a skip.
Yeah, that's a very, very good idea, because as well, when it's just binary, like yes or no, it puts you really into a quandary sometimes. I'm happy that Netflix has been listening to this podcast and they've adopted our system. We'll expect our royalty checks.
Anytime. For all of the criticisms that Netflix gets on its budget, on its spending, on its content creation, as a platform, it is still the best. There's a reason that they're number one. It's the biggest for this reason. Their platform is the most stable to use, works wherever you are, no matter what country you're in.
For sure.
And most importantly, its recommendation engine, its whatever algorithm they're using, is phenomenal. After a while, when you do the thumbs up and double thumbs up and thumbs down, it gives you a probability on each recommendation. It gives you
I'm gonna have to go back. I'm gonna have to go back and do this retroactively then.
Yeah,
you're right.
And I have to say, it's pretty spot on.
Really?
Anything that's recommended to me is usually in the 90s, and very rarely does it have something that's recommended to me highly that I dislike. So yeah, for our listeners, if you're not giving your recommendations or ratings, I recommend it because, like Stream or Skip, this will give you the opportunity to find other programs on Netflix, at least, that you wouldn't normally watch or even know of. But because of the accuracy, or at least the power of their recommendation engine, they will give you recommendations that you wouldn't otherwise have thought.
Okay, that's great to know. So what we did today is we went through our Streamer Skip, which was, for me, Sneaky Pete on Amazon Prime. For you, it was Gen V, spinoff of The Boys on Amazon Prime.
Right.
We went back, we finalized Bodies, which I had last week. And now I think there's one more thing to say, and that is our favorite show, the one that we've probably dedicated more time to talking about, is back for season 4, and that is on Apple TV Plus, For All Mankind.
I'm so excited.
My level of excitement is through the roof. The first one is out. Will episode 2 be out by next week?
Yes, it should be.
Let's do a preview where we just kind of recap what happened at the end of season 3 and where we are with everything. And we'll dive into having watched episodes 1 and 2 and give our thoughts.
I think that's absolutely great. And I think we should then sit down and talk about what we think is going to happen in the rest of the season.
predictions. Can't wait. Oh, man. I mean, we've been waiting for All Mankind. How many months has it been now? More than 12, right?
So this came out in June of last year.
Yeah, so it's been like 15, 16 months.
Yeah.
I cannot wait.
I'm super excited. It'll be good to see what happens and how they deal with whatever they need to deal with. As an aside, along the lines of The Boys and Gen V, I know I've made this recommendation to you in the past, but I know that it's a bit of a tougher sell because it's animated. Invincible also started its second season.
Oh, yes.
I highly recommend you watch it. I think it's going to be very, very good. The first season was, in my opinion, one of the strongest superhero programs out there, period. If you're a fan of comic books, if you're a fan of superheroes, I recommend.
I'm in. Pete, if our listeners want to give us some feedback on what they think about Sneaky Pete, Gen V, The Boys, Bodies, tell us how excited they are about For All Mankind, where should they message us?
I'll tell you that in a second. Let's talk about what we're going to be assigned for next week as well.
And that.
So for next week, you are going to be on Netflix and you're going to be watching a show which I put on your list that I think you're going to really like. I haven't seen it yet, but I think it's right up our alleys. It's called Who is Aaron Carter?
Oh, I've seen
trending.
It's trending.
Top
I've seen
10, and it looks like it's an action / spy thriller. So that on its own gives me a little bit of hope that it's something that we're going to enjoy.
I'm in.
I will unfortunately be on Amazon Prime again. And I have to say, by the way, watching Gen V was a bloody nightmare on Amazon.
Oh, really?
Oh,
really?
I ended up having to download onto my iPad because it was easier for me to download it than to watch it on streaming. Like it was,
oh my gosh,
virtually unplayable streaming.
That's terrible.
It's just horrendous. And I know that I'm traveling right now, but I'm not traveling to like the middle of the Sahara Desert with satellite internet. I have a fiber connection.
Yeah.
It's fast internet. I don't get it.
That's terrible. Amazon, boo, if you're listening.
Double boo. In any case, I will be on Amazon Prime watching a show called The Griffin.
Okay, before I jump the gun, now I'm excited for watching Who is Aaron Carter. Aaron with an E-R-I-N. It's a lady Aaron
That's
Carter, right?
That's exactly.
Not the singer from Backstreet Boys.
No, not the singer from Backstreet Boys. But in the meantime, if you guys have any other recommendations, if you have any other thoughts on Gen V, if there's a specific scene in Gen V or even The Boys that you thought was super gory, super hilarious, we want to know, because
I want to know.
Every season, there's always some scene that makes it just shocks and kind of elevates it. Where do they go next? Let's find out. We don't know yet.
The first one that shocked me was, remember the whale on The Boys?
Oh, man. Yes, absolutely. The whale in season 1 was unbelievable.
With the Deep. Remember the Deep? He was so sad.
So gross as well. But hilarious. I mean, again, hilarious.
And by The Boys standards, that was very tame.
Oh my God. It was almost like cute.
I just remember the look on the Deep's face. Absolutely priceless. Yeah. Absolutely priceless.
So yeah, reach out to us. Tell us. I want to know what your favorite scene in The Boys or even Gen V was. Tweet at us at F&S Podcast. DM us on Instagram at Films and Stuff Podcast. Email us aloha@filmsandstuffpodcast.com. Or as always, the best way to reach out to us is like this video, leave a comment below, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell so that you're going to be the first to know when the next episode of the Films and Stuff podcast drops.
Pete, I always appreciate the concise and comprehensive way that you describe those details. And we do look forward to a bunch of comments and likes. And we will be back next week with another episode of Stream or Skip on the Films and Stuff podcast. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Pete, thank you.
Thank you, Ethan. Thanks, everyone.
Bye now.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Films and Stuff. If you haven't already, please subscribe and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are downloaded. Films and Stuff. There is no substitute.